when you are looking at value and shading, biggest thing to know and recognize is that there are a bunch of different ways to achieve success as you work. Right now I'm just using the side of my lead, and I got my pencil braced with my hand in such a way that I have a lot of control, but I can still use as much of the lead as possible as I'm working. I'm increasing my pressure and yet still have a significant amount of control. Even though I'm just using a number 2 pencil, or an HB pencil it's also called, I can get really quite dark. So if you are creating your just a very basic value scale, you can still get significant dark value within that time. All right, so if we're creating a value scale, we can have different levels. You could continue on even further. For our purposes, I'm just going to do a gradual one here. As I move forward, I'm going to decrease my pressure, excuse me. And remember, it's always easier to add than it can be sometimes to take away. That's not to say you can't use your eraser if you don't want to. You definitely can. It's there for a reason. I'm barely using any pressure here. Now doing that, smearing them together, obviously made them very similar all the way across, so I can go in with my eraser. I'm not pressing hard at all with my eraser. But it's just creating a very basic value scale and all the way down. Now there are a lot of different types of value scales. You do see ones that go from 10 being the darkest and 1 being the lightest. There are ones that go all over the place, and there are different types of value scales based on the types of pencil you're using. For our purposes, we're not using drawing pencils because most people don't have them. If you do have them and you'd like to use them and see the differences, I would highly encourage you to do that, but it is not required. Just a basic value scale for this one, and we are also going to be creating a sphere. Now, if you'd like to just trace an object like what I'm doing, you're welcome to do that. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to. When we're creating a sphere, you want to follow the object, and I'm just using regular blending and shading for this. If you want to use a specific type of shading, you definitely can, but that is going to be up to you. We're always going to have that highlighted area. Remember, your highlighted area is where the light is hitting it, and it gets darker from there. Make sure your edges are sharp and precise. You're going to have your core shadow, and your core shadow is going to be your darkest area on the sphere. And there is a reflected highlight on the back right over here, so you have to factor that in as well when you're working. If you wanted to use a different blending technique and shading technique, that is definitely up to you. I'm just using regular base shading for mine, but it's going to be your choice how you proceed and create your sphere. Obviously in the darker areas, I'm pressing much heavier. And I am going to want to soften this up. Notice that I'm using every single one of the numbers along my value scale that I already created. If you do have a blending stick that you'd like to use to soften everything, you definitely can utilize that. Otherwise, you can always just use your fingers. Keep in mind these blending tools are going to have a tendency to gray out some of your really dark darks. So you're probably going to have to go back in and add some more values. Same thing with your highlights. If you're not careful, they are going to take away some of those brilliant whites. But this is just a good way to soften everything up, give it a little bit more of a finished look as you are working. Alright, so just soften everything up. Now I'm going to go back in, add some defining lines and areas, and I'm going to create my cast shadow. Now your cast shadow is what makes it being the sphere, not float. You always want to have a cast shadow. And your cast shadow is generally very dark. Right next to the sphere, and lightens up as it gets further away, just like a shadow does in real life. And that reflected area is going to be right alongside the sphere. And this will also help define the edges of the sphere you created. How severe your shadow is going to be up to you as you work. But that is basically how you draw and shade a sphere. And you can always keep working and add in and establishing more values, and the longer you work, generally speaking, the more improved it's going to be. But that is how you shade your sphere. Thanks for watching.